In this video, we will show you how to automate the process of assigning custom previews to your 3D or material assets with the help of the Autoassign Previews tool. You can use the links we provided in the video's description to quickly jump to the topic you're most interested in. In Connector, each asset, a 3D file, material, HDRI, etc., can have a custom preview, or even a gallery of multiple previews. We need previews to visually connect with files' content, which is, in most cases, hidden unless you open the file in the respective software. So having nice descriptive previews for all your assets is a must if you'd like to find what you need much faster and more conveniently. We as 3D artists need some visual browsing that designers and photographers enjoy in Adobe Bridge or other image browsers. How do we do this? The most straightforward way to add a preview in Connector is to simply drag an image file from within Connector, or multiple files. Also, you can drag files from Explorer, or you can double-click a file and then use the Add More Previews button. Although this is a very easy way to add your custom previews, it's not really a good solution if you have hundreds or even thousands of assets in your library. That's why Connector has this powerful tool called Autoassign Previews to help you automate the process of matching assets and previews. It's available from the Tools menu. You can use this tool to define different patterns which best describe your specific way of arranging folders, structures, and assets, naming conventions, etc. It's worth to get to know this tool so you can use it every time you add assets or just update existing ones. People often ask us why Connector can't just automatically match the assets with any existing previews. I have a folder with a max file and a preview both named the same, so why can't Connector just match them? Although this seems like an easy job, there's practically no way to cover all possible use case scenarios. Also, such automatic operations that go in the background can easily slow down the overall performance of the application. Okay, so what's the basic workflow here? We've separated the four main elements that take part in the process. We start with the Assets section. These are the files we want to add previews to, 3D files or matte files. Then we have the Preview section. Following is the section to define where all these files we'd like to relate are located. And finally, here we tell Connector how exactly we'd like it to handle the added previews. As you see, there are some useful options in here which I'll explain in detail later on. Let's take a look at the Assets section. By the way, we somewhat wrongly named it 3D files as we also have matte files in the list. By default, all file formats are selected, but you can uncheck any of these if, for example, you have the same asset in multiple formats, but you only want to add a preview to its max version. Currently, there's no way to select different render engines for the max files, but this will come soon. So here we can define a file name pattern for the assets files. I'll now remove this, add just any char string for now. We'll come back to that part later on. Here's where we can tell Connector to ignore certain assets, again based on specific file name patterns. I'm closing this now and let's open the Images section. This is where you set rules for which image files will be treated as previews. You know, the tricky thing is that Connector can't really know if a particular image file is your nice rendered preview or it's just a texture or a photo reference or anything. So these settings tell Connector what's a preview and what is not. Again, we have a list of all supported file formats selected by default. Let's take a closer look at this section here where we define file name patterns. In the drop-down, you can find a list of different types of character strings. The idea is that when we batch process multiple files, we don't know their actual names, but we probably follow certain naming patterns when we create previews for our assets. Some people match the previews names with the names of the corresponding assets files. Others do the same but also put suffixes like preview or render. And others just simply put all previews preview. Here's a quick explanation of what's what in this list. Alphabet char, a string which consists of alphabet characters only. No digits, no special symbols, only alphabet characters. Digits, okay, that's a string that contains digits only. Exact char, we use this string to define a concrete combination of characters that is used in all preview files. Previews like nicechair_preview.jpg, nicesofa_preview.jpg, etc. could require the usage of this string. 3D file's name. This naming rule is very handy when your previews match your assets' names. Special symbol. We can use this string when different parts of the file names are separated by a special symbol. Any char. This means exactly what it says, just any possible character including digits and special symbols. 3D file folder name. This specific rule will tell Connector to look for those image files that are named like the folder where the asset resides. Image folder name, another specific naming rule which use I'll cover a bit later. Let's close that now and see what's in folders section. Here are the 4 most typical use cases about how people organize the folders containing their assets and previews. First is possibly the most common. The asset and its preview are in the same folder. Next is when the preview is located in a subfolder. Follows another case where the asset and its preview are in different folders, both at the same folder level. It's a bit strange organization, but we're surprised to see that quite a lot of people are using it. The last is probably the most rare case, with the asset in a subfolder and the preview in the parent folder. I might skip this case for that presentation, but I can tell it works. Here below we can define naming patterns for the folders that contain our previews. For example, if you save the preview files in a folder always named preview, you should just set this rule here and then don't really care of how the actual preview files are named, since Connector will just take all image files in these preview folders and match them with the assets. Let's type in something. Oops, need to remove this string. Okay, let's finally add it. And remove it. Okay, let's close and take a look at the last section, which is the handling existing previews. You'll need these options when you're updating assets which already have some previews added. Add new previews and remove any existing. Or choose to add new previews to the existing, or ignore assets with previews. We also have the option to auto-hide all image files which have been added as previews. This is because you normally don't need to have the asset with a preview and another image file next to it showing the same. Alright, let's now see how this works in practice. I've organized some typical use cases to demonstrate you different aspects of the functionality the Autoassign tool offers. And before we continue, I would just like to point out that I'll be demonstrating all options using single folders containing one or just a few assets. This is only to show the concept and make the presentation faster, so keep in mind that these techniques are better applied on many folders simultaneously. This is where the automation of the Autoassign tool makes the difference. Also remember to always check which Apply Action To option you've selected. All folder forces the tool to process all folders you have added in Connector. This is something you'd rarely use. The other Selected Folder option is what you'll probably use most times, also with the Include Subfolders checkbox selected. I'll use this option during the entire presentation. So as the first use case, we can have a few max files. This is actually the same asset prepared for different render engines. All design-connected assets are normally delivered this way. We also have a couple of textures just to make the view more typical. And I've added 2 previews with names matching the V-Ray and Corona versions of the asset. So I'd like to add the 2 previews to the matching max files. It might seem easier to just drag the previews to add them, but imagine if you have to process dozens or hundreds of assets. We definitely would like to do this automatically. So let's open the Autoassign Previews tool and go to the 3D Files section. I'll leave the any char rule like it is and close this. Now let's open the Images section. I'll remove this anychar string and add 3D files name because I know that both my previews are properly named to match the 3D files. Note that when you modify the naming pattern, you always have a preview here showing you how the pattern looks like. Also, there's an example below to make it even more clear. Okay. So let's define where the files are located. In this case, we have them all in the same folder. Okay, let's process it now. Done. We have our 2 previews added to the right 3D files. Sometimes you'd like to remove previews on multiple assets. Maybe because you didn't get the right previews matched with the right assets. Or just because you'd like to make another experiment while playing with the Autoassign tool. You can of course remove any custom added previews manually from the gallery lightbox, but this is not really so fast. Instead, just select the files you want and open the Remove Previews tool. Yes, remove. So let's see another use case where we have a single asset with 2 previews, preview 1 and preview 2. How can we match these? This is in fact the easiest case because we can just tell Connector to match all image files with the single asset we have in the folder. To do so, I just need to use any char for both 3D files and images. I'll have to remove this rule and add any char. Okay. And same folder option in Folders section. Let's process it now. And done. So why didn't we use the same technique in the previous use case, you might ask? Let's go there again. See, there are a couple of textures here. So if I do what I've just done for use case 2, we'll have all these image files assigned to all 3D files. Let's do this. So any char here and any char here. Go. So here we go with all 4 image files added to all 3D files. Not really what we want. Now, use case 4. I'll skip 3 for later. What do we have here? All 3D assets and their previews are in the same folder, and each asset's name matches its preview file name. That's a perfect case scenario. It's the same as in our use case 1, but here we have multiple assets in the same folder. Let's see how we'll handle these. Again, I'll leave this any char option here since the key is how I define the matching rules in the images section. Let's remove any char and add 3D file's name. This time, I'll select the auto hide option. Go. Perfect. So what happened is that 3 of the previews were successfully matched. but these two were not. I see this is because their names are not exactly the same. Let's correct this and run it again. I click F2 to rename. Good. Also notice that the preview files changed their appearance. This is because I used the option to auto-hide the image files once they're assigned as previews. Okay, but we still see them. This is because I have the Show Hidden Files option selected. Let's see. Okay, I'll leave it like this. For use case 5, we have something more specific. It's similar to the previous case, but we have underscore plus preview at the end of each preview's name. This is quite a typical use case. "3D file section is left again on any char." Let's open the images. So we have added a rule that the previews match the respective assets' names. But there's more. I'll add the exact char string so that I can write underscore preview. Let's add this. I have the file's name plus underscore preview. Good. They are all in the same folder, so no need to change this one. I can already read it in here, contained in the same folder. Run. Okay, that's pretty cool. Everything is properly matched. Now, case 6. We have 4 assets in the folder, but where are the previews? They are in a subfolder. I can use the Show Files and Subfolder option to see everything in the same files view. Okay, but just don't forget these are not in the same folder. In the Autoassign tool, I'll open the Images section and remove this exact char string because I have my previews named after the asset files. Okay. What I also need is to change where the previews are located. I'll choose the subfolder option. And run. Let's go to use case 7. We have a similar situation with all previews saved in a subfolder. But this time, for each asset, we have 2 previews. The previews are numbered, and this will help me for the matching. Also note that the preview names have an underscore preview suffix, which we had in use case 2. So, let's open the Autoassign tool and go to the Images section. I'll need to define a bit more complex pattern here. Okay, we have the base, the 3D file's name. I'll next add exact char string and type in underscore preview. Good. Now, let's also add the special symbol string. And finally comes the digits string. See the preview? This is exactly the naming pattern our previews have. Let's try this. Cool. In case 8, we have the more rare occasion of having the assets and their previews in separate folders located in the same parent folder. I'll use the Show Files and Subfolders option to see all files. And also, let's use the quick filtering option to get these textures out of the view. So let's just type in V-Ray and done. Go to the Autoassign tool I'll need to clean this up by removing all but 3D file's name. Okay. Now let's see which option to choose here. So it's the third option, same level. Now run. Next is use case 9. Here, I'll show you how to handle assets which already have previews added. Now, for the sake of this case, I'll just drag this preview. Okay. So imagine, you have this asset with an already added preview, and there's a new preview you'd like to add to this existing one. So, let's open the Autoassign tool. We'll need to define new rules in the Images section. I'll need the exact char string. Preview, followed by special symbol and then digits. Okay. Let's change this as well. Same folder. Now let's see what we'd like to do here in the previews section. First, I'd like to add the new preview to the existing one. And I also like to have it first in the gallery. Alright. Now let's try another thing. First, remove the previews. Then again drag this one. Now, in the Autoassign tool, I'll change this to add new previews and remove existing. Run. And done. I'll use this to show you another option we have. Let's remove the preview. Alright. In the Autoassign tool, I'll use the Ignore option in the Images sections. It'll basically tell Connector to add as previews all image files except those having the pattern we define here. So let's activate the Ignore image file names by adding an exact char, dcmap_. Now we only need to add the any char string. Good. Shall we try this? Nice, isn't it? We have both previews added and the texture files were ignored. Now let's go back to use case 3. Now this is quite a tricky situation with the variations of the same asset prepared for V-Ray and Corona. And then we have two previews named preview_V-Ray and preview_Corona. I'll use this case to show you that currently there are cases which the Autoassign tool can't handle in a single shot, so you'll have to plan your steps first. What I'm going to do now is process the assets in two separate steps. First, in 3D Files section, I'll need any char followed by exact char. Let's type in _VRay here. Okay. Now in the Images section, I'll need another setup with the exact char string, only since our previews names are entirely custom. I'll type in preview_VRay here. Whoops. Again. I need preview_VRay. Right. So we've matched the V-Ray version of the asset with the right preview. It might not seem like a big deal for a single asset, but imagine if we were now processing 100 folders and they are all done in a single click. Okay, so I'll repeat this for the Corona version. Okay, done. For the last case, 10, I'll show you how to use one not so obvious option, Handle numbered files. So let's imagine that we have work in progress versions of the same asset and you'd like to add preview only to the last one. In this case, it's _03. I'll leave any char here, but let's select the handle numbered files option now. For the images, any char will do the work. Run action. Done. Okay, so we have all previews matched with the last numbered version of the asset. Now, if you use the same option under the images section, it'll force connector to add only the last numbered preview file. I hope you can now use the Autoassign tool to easily match all your assets with the existing or future previews. Thanks for watching.